up to 08:37 hours GMT, 8:37 a.m. so-called British Standard Time in the UK. So what we are doing is part A. It's starting the part A of the KHOODEELAAR television channel, broadcasting only on the internet. But even though it's broadcast only on the internet, it is accessible to anyone who applies the correct locator algorithm. FT investigation pages 24 and 25, the inside story of the Pfizer vaccine. Unequal pandemic variant found in South Africa shows wider rollout of jabs is vital. Now this is contradictory because they cannot confirm, they cannot prove that vaccines prevent the infection and the spread. And there is no definitive objectively scientific finding of independent, objective scientific investigation. And since this Indian origin, far-right British mental slave of the right wing in the European context, Janan Ganesh, was planted in the financial crimes. He has been running these pieces, how the Democrats are losing to the far right and the racists and the Trumpites. That is what his agenda is, and those are the headlines. Today's one is Biden's democracy. Biden's democracy summit risks flattering the enemy. So he is suggesting that he is objective, that is enemy, but he is actually the enemy's agent. Okay, so this piece are 2 pages on the financial crimes, the coronavirus pandemic, the big FTB greed, and it says the inside story of the Pfizer vaccine. And again, it's a pretentious piece because it says the American company now dominates the market for COVID jabs. By American company, it of course refers to Pfizer. But does that give Pfizer too much power? So that's the question that supposedly is being answered in the 2-page spread by Hannah Kushla, Donato Paolo Mancini, or Paolo Mancini, and David Pilling. And what is the last paragraph say? Jeffrey Porges, an analyst at SBB Leerink, an investment bank that specializes in healthcare, says the financial firepower will fuel Pfizer's growth for years. It's a once in an epoch economical windfall, he says. And this 2-page spread has been written with additional reporting by Kieran Stacey in Washington, Oliver Barnes and Sarah Neville in London, Erika Solomon in Berlin, Niku Asghari in New York, Mehul Srivastava in Jerusalem, and Sam Fleming in Brussels. Now, Mehul Srivastava is an Indian name. Funny, isn't it? That they have placed this Mehul Srivastava Not in Bombay, not in Mumbai, not in New Delhi or Bangalore, but in Jerusalem or in Israel. We shall be looking at the financial crimes piece about Afghans fleeing Taliban risk perilous boat journeys to UK. Can you believe this? Perilous boat journeys to the UK by Afghans who have been forced to flee their homeland by the occupation, the latest cycle of occupation by the imperialists. And the financial crimes doesn't actually say what I'm saying. That's the difference. I'm doing the world exclusive diagnosis of the lying, and they're lying, doing the lying. Let's see, just making sure that I have not got any of it wrong in terms of the narrative and the agenda. So they're saying that they're showing a kind of map starting in Afghanistan, Gadris, and then Nimruz, and through Iran, through Turkey, Istanbul, and then Serbia, and the Dunkirk. Paris, 95 days, and Dunkirk, 106 days from Afghanistan. What they're saying, Anna Gross in Dunkirk and Robert Wright in London. Kabuli is one of those opting for the clandestine route to the UK. There is at least a sleeping place for us there, some food for us there, until our asylum application is dealt with. Here, Kabuli said, pointing to dozens of tents being lashed by the rain, there is nothing. Now, the world is bigger, and the world is richer than Little England. And yet here is this emptiness, this wasteland scenario, where the whole world is a wasteland. There is nothing. And London alone has something. Who created this? And there is nothing in any of this coverage or cover-ups about what the United Nations stands for, what the United Nations is doing, if it is doing anything whatsoever. And there is no statesman, none in the whole world, none in the planet expanse of the world, no statesperson, no leader of a state, no leader of a movement that is being mentioned even as recognizing the wasteland that the world has been turned into. And there is no mention of what the USA did to Afghanistan. What the USA did to the Kurdistan. All these people, this is the center of Asia, coming all the way 106 days to reach Dunkirk and 95 days to reach Paris. And it's coming through Iran, Turkey, Hungary, Serbia, France, and of course it's not far from Germany. And it's called An Afghan Refugee's Journey. This is not very clear on the screen, but anyone viewing this and anyone interested to get the facts can follow the KHOODEELAAR Twitter account, where some of the pictures are posted, and we shall be posting all these 4 pictures that the Financial Crimes is running today on page 8 after the broadcast. And they should actually follow this as a matter of regular checking, because we publish, not all, but we publish quite a lot of pictures and images that are referred to and mentioned in the actual broadcast. Nobody else would do that, because we are doing that as part of the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And Fleet Street is made up of financial crimes and others. So we shall come back to the financial crimes. We just got this long two-page piece about Pfizer, and it is saying confidently that Pfizer will dominate the world, or dominate that sector of the business market. Now, this is a very unusual heading on page 1 of the Daily Scar, heading given to the racist Don Newsom, saying that hateful bullies hiding behind masks of COVID. So she's not actually talking about hatred, racist hatred. She's talking about some others, let's say. Now, she starts by saying this corrupt, cruel, racist brag. After a blissful weekend of switching off to stomp around our glorious coastline, it's a bit of a shock to come back to a week where we are plunged back into the most contagious symptom of COVID ever. Now, coastline, glorious coastline, is where these migrants were massacred. Notice the difference. She is not only denying that, but she is glorifying her denial, the racist denial of the massacre. She is a congenital racist. And there is this Daily Scum is doing the kind of joke, political joke. He's saying that taking a nap while on the job has caught out top figures. And the top figures, of course, is Jacob Rees-Mogg, followed by Joe Biden, Kim Kardashian, Niall Horan, and Morgan Freeman. This is the Daily Scar, which is completely, absolutely stupid. Because its headline, "Stop with the hate." But it's not hate, racist hatred or hatred of the migrants. It's completely something artificial. And there is a warning on page 2 from North Korea's Kim Jong-un, saying that the UK security pact with the United States and Australia has brought nuclear war closer. Under that agreement, AUKUS, the US and the UK provide tech or technology, so Australia can build 8 nuclear-powered subs. But North Korea blasted the US as the world's largest country of war and invasion. An official claimed the partnership would trigger a nuclear arms race as well as disturbing peace and stability. Well, of course, the US is the biggest arsenal, nuclear arsenal, and there is no mention of this lethal capacity, which is being made worse for the world, for the planet every day. And the Scar editorial, so called, is opining as follows: seriously ill BBC. Well, it calls auntie, but auntie may not be kind of understandable to people who are not in this UK. The BBC has barely raised a smile in years. So it will come as no surprise to discover the broadcaster appears to have officially abandoned trying to be funny. Ofcom found that the amount of comedy shows aired on the BBC has more than halved over the last decade. Instead, they have just wasted our millions trying to make us all miserable with endlessly bleak dramas. Yet bosses still have the cheek to demand more funding. The sooner this creaking leech of an institution dies, the better. So this scum is saying that the BBC should be killed off. And the way to kill it off is by stopping the license fee that is paid for it. Now, that is not a very serious piece of argument, even though they mention the findings in the Ofcom. Ofcom is supposed to be the organization that actually audits broadcasters. But Ofcom, like the Labour Party, has been killed off a long time ago. It's dead. Now here is a picture on page 16 of today's Daily Scar. Picture of someone there calling ISIS bride. It's actually Shamima Begum. But they're not calling her Shamima Begum. They're calling her ISIS bride or jihadi bride before giving her name. So they are saying that she is afraid of being burned to death because they're saying that jihadi bride Shamima Begum fears she will be killed by arsonists targeting westernized, less Muslim women. What she's saying that she is not only not a jihadi or a ISIS bride, she is now westernized and less Muslim woman, one of the 22-year-old Brit and her friend Hafida Hadush believed they could become the next victims of tent fires in the Al-Roj camp, Syria, where they are being held. Begum says they are prime targets because they are seen as less devout than their camp mates. She said, "We just live in fear constantly." Begum fled Britain as a teenager in 2015 to join Islamic State, but has since claimed she was groomed. This is a stupid piece. She didn't actually flee. She was one of the girls from Tower Hamlets, East London in the UK, who had been groomed. And I believe they have been used as, in the worst possible way, as sex slaves. These are not radicals. If there is any evidence of any radicalism in them, then it would again be part of the same brainwashing and grooming. Our campaign for justice for these children, within placing them between the years of their being groomed by elements that, according to the Wikipedia entry, operated from the East London Mosque based in Whitechapel Road in Tower Hamlets. And this is something that wasn't available online immediately, but it has been since. And our campaign for justice for these children is based on the fact that they were children when they are targeted, whoever targeted them, and that the fact that they were groomed or any of them was groomed, whether from an address or location based in Tower Hamlets or not, doesn't matter. The fact that these children were groomed to embark on something that would be very damaging to them personally and damaging to society generally, and damaging to the idea of Muslims in particular. Because nobody in the Muslim community that our campaign knows about has ever produced any proof or evidence that they themselves, these kind of Muslims, were in any way involved in doing the grooming. So it's a very irresponsible charge or blame against ordinary Muslims. Because First of all, these children even didn't tell their own parents what they were being put through by the groomers. And the only responsible authority, responsible publicly funded outfit that should have kept an eye on these children the democratically identifiable outfit is, of course, the local Tower Hamlets Borough Council. And the Tower Hamlets Borough Council has remained totally silent. And the other parts of the UK state have allowed the Tower Hamlets Council to remain silent, including parts of the corrupt British judiciary, the High Court, the Supreme Court, even the Court of Appeal, which made a kind of one-off decision that didn't appear to be a rubber stamping operation on behalf of the corrupt UK quote state. Because the Court of Appeal said, in a ruling that since has been kind of superseded by the rubber stamping role played by the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal said that Shamima Begum's application to return to the UK to challenge the UK state's removal of her British by birth citizenship, the Court of Appeal said that she should be allowed to return to challenge the removal of her citizenship by birth. But the Court of Appeal's decision was overturned by the corrupt Supreme Court. Now, anyone who knows the law, that is to say, who has actually studied, quote, English law, international law, and is familiar with the actual jurisprudence, actual kind of contents of the judicial decisions, would know that there is no way to predict the outcome of a particular trial or appeal. Now, that may appear to be evidence that the court system, that the judges are independent and they are not capable of being programmed or briefed or bribed or persuaded or prompted or triggered to give their, quote, ruling in any particular way. That is the apparent kind of view. But the actual view is that there is no consistent compliance with the universal values of the rule of law and the due process and of telling the truth independently. That's what it proves. So, the English courts and tribunal system, so-called system within quotation marks, anyone watching this must be aware that many of the verbal statements cannot kind of include quotes. But many of the actual editorial contents of our broadcast and our commentary should be deemed to have quotation marks around them, precisely because without quotation marks, they appear to be accepted and acceptable to us, which is not the case. So the judiciary, when we say judiciary, you should assume that we are saying it within quotation marks. When we are saying English judiciary, you should again assume that there is a quotation mark at the beginning and at the end. And when we say English judiciary, one, in fact, this refers to the whole of the UK. You should understand the intended rejection by us of any assumption that the UK has a judicial constitution, because the UK doesn't. And the other thing is that the Little English jurisdiction is really what the British judicial jurisdiction is, because the Little English dominant jurisdiction of, quote, British law is actually English law, not even accompanying England and Wales, although officially, if you read the textbooks and the law reports, so-called, you will see that detailed tale behind England and Wales. This is a corrupt, racist, imperialist kind of description. Wales doesn't play any central part whatsoever in anything, not just about English law, but about anything else where Wales is treated as an addendum, as a tail after the utterance, the citation, the mention of the English. So what is the jurisprudence? The jurisprudence is as corrupt, as dishonest, as English-centric as Thomas Babington Macaulay was in his diaries in his 1830s. Prescription for the subcontinent of Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh today. To be subjected to a brainwashing program under the guise of education, which would produce or convert these people into brown on the outside and English on the inside in their mentality. So the jurisprudence, the contents of the jurisprudence that you can refer to, if you look at the picture or the typical picture of a, quote, barrister, licensed law trading barrister, or a judge, you'd see in the background big volumes. These images are intended to frighten the person who is looking at them, terrify them, lest they be hit by a heavy piece of English jurisprudence, which serves as a stone to destroy them. The truth is that these are absolute packs of lies. English law is a pack of lies. English jurisprudence is a pack of lies. Which is why the massacre of the people by sinking, by drowning, is not featuring in any of Fleet Street a week on since they were massacred. And there has been no call whatsoever from anyone in England calling for the prosecution of the criminals who are responsible for the massacre of the migrants. And K Starmer instead of demanding prosecution of the criminals, staged his own stunt in order to divert attention, public attention from the massacre of the migrants to something stupid, which is his cruel kind of reshuffle. Cruel because he was diverting cruelly from the attention that should have been paid to the massacre victims. So he staged a diversion. This is the diversion to stage a whole dead reshuffle. And this picture, now I'm a photographer. I've been taking pictures for decades now. This is a picture which is printed with an angle. They're taken with an angle that on the first sighting shows Angela Rayner on the right looking sternly and with hostility at Starmer, but she's not looking at him at all. She could be looking at any of the 45 degrees, different degrees to her right. And the camera, this camera or the freeze, has been executed in order at a moment when she looks as if she's looking at Starmer. She's not, because there are other people right to her right and to the right of Starmer. Many other people, many other kind of targets, visual targets, if you like, or visual destinations. But this is the depiction of the diversion. This is the depiction of the diversion, depiction in the Daily Mail owned I newspaper, which is running the story as the Daily Mail itself is running, which is saying that levers reshuffle shambles. So they are having a kind of go at the anti-labor so-called elements, which is essentially the conservative scum. But this is not a reshuffle that has actually constituted any substance. A reshuffle means a policy change, a change of direction. There is nothing. Because all these people that have been reshuffled and shuffled out, they constitute no substance whatsoever. So what is happening to the international obligations to prevent massacres and deaths of the most vulnerable, like the refugees who got sunk in the channel? The British call it English Channel and the French call it the French Channel. So we call it the channel because we don't want to be echoing either Britain or France. Essentially, Starmer, who has politically martyred the Labour Party, is still engaged in the murderous agenda, which is that he is carrying out the after murder routines to make sure that the Labour Party doesn't have any impact in political demands for accountability aimed at the congenital liar Boris Johnson. Now imagine one person dying. I mean, any number of persons dying is a death too many. But if there are people, 30 people, 27 to 30 people, or 31 people are massacred, the least that should happen is to launch immediate prosecutions and other demands and other activities that make sure that not a single person dies again. And this is anticipated. The fact that the people seeking asylum and refuge would be protected and safeguarded by the destination countries is, of course, contained in the 1951 Refugee Convention. And it is the job of signatory states that have ratified the convention to make sure that when something like this massacre sinking happens, they would invoke both the requirements of the 1951 Refugee Convention, but all the requirements of other associated conventions, declarations, agreements, and treaties. So there should be mention of all of those things that I have just been outlining again in the papers. But there is not. There is none. So Fleet Street is not only complicit with the UK government being in denial of the responsibilities over the massacres of these people are designated. These people are not unexpected and appeared from nowhere. People in that route, or in the routes from, as I said in the Financial Crimes, from Afghanistan to Dunkirk and France, are only following one of many routes taken by would-be migrants and would-be asylum seekers. So the Kurdish origin people, who were among the majority, if not all of them, were involved in the sinking and the massacre a week ago today. But there are, as the Financial Crimes is admitting today, others, refugees and seekers of refuges and asylum, that come from as far as Afghanistan. And they're showing that by road, it takes about 106 days to reach Dunkirk and 95 days to reach France. What about the difference of the dates? The routes are there. The routes have been created by the pressure of the wasteland, the pressure of nothing being available for sustainable life in the countries of origin. That's what is happening in Afghanistan, and that's what is happening in Syria, in Iraq, and other places from where people are currently aiming to reach Western Europe, where, according to this quotation, according to this quotation on page 8 of the Financial Times today, Wednesday, the 1st of December 2021, that, I mean, Kabuli is differently spelled than Kabul, just adding an I at the end. That means somebody from Kabul. So Kabuli is a simple name to understand. And this is not a name of an individual proper name. This is somebody who was hiding his identity for legal reasons. One leading member of the British Afghan community, who declined to be named because of the issue's sensitivity, said, "We need to understand that we can expect people to come illegally if there are no legal routes." Remember these legal and illegal. It's the illegality that is the main feature of the crossing of the channel. And why is the main feature illegality? The answer is that both France and the UK and Germany and other Western European countries involved in the geographical kind of routes have been blocking legal routes of passage. They have been illegally blocking the legal routes of passage. Now, the details of the legality and illegality will take longer than a general summary, which is that if the UK were complying with the legal obligations imposed on it both by the 1951 Refugee Convention and other international treaties, then no one seeking or needing to seek refuge would risk or take the risk of crossing the channel in any shape or form in that way, because there are legal routes and they can be allowed in, and they don't need to do the illegal, deadly risk. So, any lawyer, licensed law trader, any kind of member of the kind of international non-profit organizations who has the knowledge of the law and who has the moral imperative associated with the assistance available through the law should have started by now, 1 week on after the massacre, international court-based prosecution of the criminals, including the traffickers, and also criminals as members of the various agencies working under the French government and the UK government. But have you heard? I haven't heard, and there is no way that any of these criminals is being prosecuted or arrested. Now, if you look at the history, of the kind of propaganda against refugees for the last 2 years, let's take the last 2 years, because the incumbent fronter of the corrupt regime in the UK is Johnson, corrupt and racist Boris Johnson. What he has been doing, first of all, he put the most ignorant and shameless person in the post of Home Secretary, Priti Patel. Patel is not somebody who has ever come across as being aware, knowledge-wise, aware of the responsibilities of her government department or of her entire department or that of the UK state under the international legal regime or framework. So you would think that the licensed law trader K Starmer would have made some noise about the breaking of the laws by the UK state, so that the massacre of the people that were massacred could be used as an example of what can happen if a particular signatory country breaks the law. And all accounts so far suggest that the French police refused to help the people who were desperately seeking help by saying that the sinking boat, or the boat about to sink, was in English or British waters. And the British side said the same thing about the sinking vessel being in the French waters. That's very opposite to what the treaty signatories were supposed to do and are supposed to do. So they openly broke their requirements and their duties, and they did so with the knowledge that these people that they were ignoring were in the middle of being killed, the middle of being drowned. It's the highest evidence of culpability, criminality, and callousness. Any student of the definition of crime would know that callous and knowledge and awareness and lack of compassion and refusal to help, these are all grave levels of criminality, and these crimes have been committed without getting access to the actual list of people who were aware of this. It could be at least a few dozen people, if not hundreds, on both sides of the channel, including the various vessels and boats that went past while these people were crying desperately to be saved as human beings by fellow human beings. This was massacre. And there is nothing in the UK, nothing in Fleet Street, that is saying a fraction of what I've been saying. And I'm not saying anything that is personally generated. I'm saying that the 1951 Refugee Convention exists and has existed for 70 years now. And none of these people should have been left to drown. The fact that they were left to drown, and the fact that they were left by the employees of the signatory states to drown, constitutes massacre caused by these employees and by these states. So what are they saying there? They are saying that these people not only were neglected, but all the kind of cash that they had actually put on the table, if you like, to get across, were lost and destroyed as well. And what the financial crimes is saying, I mean, it's making a focus on the Afghan applicants. And it's putting a positive gloss on the number of Afghan origin applicants for refugees in the UK being successful. The crucial thing is that no application can be successful unless the people have actually physically landed on UK soil. That is the thing. So it's a catch 22. If they don't land on the UK soil, then they can't make an application, etc., etc. And the descent into drowning and mass murder is very real if they can't get into the UK. And what is happening with this obsession? The obsession with the diversion, because the Beaverbrook Express, this is to do with Beaverbrook. Beaverbrook is a Canadian racist criminal murderer who made the Daily Express the most racist organ during the period that he sucked up to Winston Churchill. But although Beaverbrook is dead, the narrative, racist narrative and idiocy, absolutely unchanged. So today's papers have got Epstein's Madam, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the boosting of the image of Boris Johnson as the one that is boosting. That's the boost. That's the boost that Johnson is actually embarked on. And Rishi Sunak is saying that he is a low tax Tory. And there is no mention anywhere of the refugees. Now, the I newspaper, which has been taken over by the Daily Mail group, is abusing its circulation success that followed its launch as part of the online independent. And what it is doing is maintaining the same kind of apparent style in heading and presentation. But the agenda it is pushing is the agenda of the corrupt Daily Mail, corrupt and racist Daily Mail. Today's front page on, briefing about politics is running an item about Christmas drinks row is latest standoff between Rayner and Starmer. Now, yesterday, this particular paper said that Starmer is undermining Angela Rayner. Instead of being able to sack her, because he cannot sack her, she is directly elected by members of the Labour Party. But the Independent said Starmer wants to make sure that she remembers that although she is directly elected by Labour Party members, she is the deputy to the leader. Now that is stupid, because the stupidity is in the fact that they're reducing the various statements to the level of a row between two individuals. Instead of saying what the party, if it exists, because as far as we are concerned, all the evidence shows that K Starmer has politically murdered the Labour Party. By political murder, we of course distinguish it from physical murder, but political murder means that all the political steps and the political kind of positions and stands that the Labour Party should be taking if it were alive are not being taken. And as we said, the perversity of Starmer staging a reshuffle completes the picture. That he is keen on diverting attention from real activities, the real duties of the state, real failings of the state. The massacre of the migrants by the regime fronted by the racist Boris Johnson is the key point. Now here today, Wednesday, in the I newspaper is an acknowledgement that the Omicron jab, the vaccine for the new virus, won't be ready for another 6 months, expert says. And the fact that the UK points of entry into the UK, let's say the airports, are not fit for purpose is admitted in this piece. Africa arrivals who took indirect flights may have evaded checks. What difference should there be whether a person has taken a direct flight or indirect flight? The answer is because the Johnson-fronted cabal, so-called government, is a superficial government, unfit for purpose, and is not engaged in delivering safety for the people. Safeguarding and safety are very related, aren't they? Our campaign for justice for the children, including Shamima Begum as a child, focuses on the role that the council, Tower Hamlets Council, has owed to the children and has neglected. That duty is called safeguarding children duties. And if Tower Hamlets Council was doing the safeguarding duties, these girls, these children, would never have been groomed. Now, everyone who has done the checking on the activities of these children would know the facts, so I'm not going to repeat item by item, but everything that has been done against these children, their prospect and their opportunities and their safeties and their life chances, everything that has been destroyed, including the fact that almost 3 of the girls are presumed dead now. So these children were neglected by Tower Hamlets Council. And the reason why the neglect matters is because at any point during their being groomed, that is brainwashed and zombified, all of that took place while they were at home, attending the school. At any point, these girls could have been, let's say, sensitively kind of contacted by the personnel who should have delivered these safeguarding duties. And these children could have been saved. That is what we call justice for these children. Now, the council didn't do that. Not only did the council, Tower Hamlets Council in London, fail or neglect the duties, safeguarding children duties, during the duration of their being brainwashed and groomed. The council has remained to this day, 1st of December 2021, Wednesday, absolutely silent about these children. Now, they were first reported, to our knowledge, to most people's knowledge, as having crossed out of the UK into Syria in February 2015. So 6 calendar years ago, the first that the public knew about these girls, these children, it happened 6 calendar years ago. And in between then and now, Tower Hamlets Council has had 6 calendar years to do whatever it could do to help these children, because They remained children for several years after that event in February 2015. But our Armed Council has not done anything. So the dysfunction and the negligence to do the safeguarding duties, as evident in the case of Armed Council, neglecting its duties towards these 4 children from the Bethnal Green area. That kind of negligence is repeated by the UK state agencies in letting the migrants sink to their deaths. It's not like the victims of the massacre of Wednesday last week, a week ago today. It's not like those people were unheard of before. Various stages that they went through before they were massacred, they were sunk. They were in contact with various agencies of the UK, agencies of France. So they didn't suddenly appear from the jungle near Calais, where they had been hiding. They had not been hiding. So the prosecution should happen immediately of the people who they were in contact with and the people who were engaged, employed, paid employees of the UK state and the French state. And we say that same again about the Armed Council. The executive mayor in post in February 2015 was, of course, the corrupt Sylvie Bermann. And he has not, as far as our campaign can identify, he has not spoken or commented on the 4 Bethnal Green schoolgirls being neglected by the Armed Council and their lives being destroyed directly as a result of the Armed Council's negligence. Nor as the crook, John Biggs, who has in the same corrupt post as held previously by Sylvie Bermann. Biggs has not said a single thing. So who else should have done anything? Well, the elected councillors of the Borough of Tower Hamlets, of course. But there have been elected councillors standing for election at 2018. And there have been, quote, manifestos published allegedly by these wannabe councillors. None of the manifestos mentioned the 4 Bethnal Green schoolgirls. And these people who wanted to be and have become councillors at the May 2018 council election have not said a single thing since getting elected. And they include both white and Bangladeshi councillors, and these girls are all Bangladeshi. British born but Bangladeshi origin. None of the councillors in Tower Hamlets, as I speak today, so far that is, has come on the record saying anything, a single thing about these girls. Anything, a single thing as a duty of safeguarding these children as owed to them, owed to the electorate, owed to their parents, owed to the public by the Hrs Council. So why has the corrupt council not been prosecuted for that criminal negligence? The criminal negligence, I would say, on the evidence, all the evidence, has led to the mass murder or killing or manslaughter of the girls, at least 3 of them. The only known survivor of the group of 4 from Bethnal Green is, of course, Shamima Begum. And if the report in the SCAR, Daily Star today, is at all reliable in any way, then Shamima Begum fears that she would be murdered by vengeful arsonists who might set fire to her place of refuge in the Roj camp in Syria, where she is currently being held. Is there any sign of the Hrs Council doing anything to save Shamima Begum, literally, given the fears that she has publicly expressed about her safety? There is nothing, there is no evidence anywhere that Hrs Council is doing anything to help Shamima Begum. Now, what's the difference between the Tolerance Council's behavior against these girls and the behavior of Jeffrey Epstein and his close associate, the groomer, Ghislaine Maxwell? What's the difference between Ghislaine Maxwell operating from her royally connected circuit and the groomers of the four girls, one directly and the other three indirectly through her, at later evidence suggests, operating from the East London Mosque in Whitechapel? What's the difference? Because with the exception of Jeffrey Epstein himself, who is allegedly committed suicide, all the other victims of the grooming are still physically alive. In the case of Shamima Begum, she lost not just one, but she lost 3 children. Now, this is absolutely appalling because she had children when she was herself a child. So, Tolerance Council should have begun to engage with her and look after her when she was getting pregnant as a child. None of the so-called elected councillors in Tower Hamlets has said a single thing. So what does it show? Do these councillors have mental capacity to understand basic ordinary duties? They may have kind of defenders who say that they have capacity. But in the case of these children, the Shamima Begum and the other 3 girls, there is no evidence that these councillors have the mental capacity to understand the duties of the council. Is that an exception or is that the norm? That is to say, are these councillors, the same councillors, neglecting other duties owed to the electors? So we got back to Sheffield, where Hillsborough is. And Sheffield Council is saying, according to the piece in the Times today, that Sheffield will not change streets in the city named after slaves owners or slave owners. Now, here is a piece on 2 pages of the Times today that is not anywhere else. And this one is got 2 page, across 2 pages, the heading is, "The water is coming in so fast. Channel migrants' terror on film." So, as I said yesterday, as the new evidence emerge, it will become even clearer than before that amount of evidence emerged when we said that it was a massacre. And it is a massacre. A passenger on a dinghy operated by the people smuggling gang responsible for the drowning of 27 migrants described his terror as they were left adrift on the same night as the disaster. The Kurdish people smugglers arranged to take about 60 passengers across the channel, split into two groups, it emerged yesterday. Both boats suffered engine failure during the crossing a week ago. One sank with the loss of all but two of its passengers. Video footage taken by Hakim Saeed, a passenger in the second boat, shows desperate migrants waving and shouting for help as they drifted in the sea. Now, this is 2 pages. It would be very distressing to read all of that. So, as I said, they were massacred. And yet, the first thing that Boris Johnson did was to mount a propaganda war against the French. All the evidence shows that the people who are alive shouting, crying, and begging for help to be saved. And the British ones failed to or refused to help them. And they were not helped. Now, this is a kind of 2-page spread that contains text and copy and photographs from the video taken by this particular survivor, that the rest of Fleet Street is not carrying. And this one is a report about racists protesting not long before the massacre. The protesters, the racists, stopped a voluntary lifeboat from being launched to help the people that were at risk of drowning. And this woman called Rachel Loudon, a resident of Hastings, and her friend Jane Grimshaw, 52, have set up Hastings supports refugees who have arrived, who give arrivals, the people who survive, clothes, blankets, and hot food and drink before they are taken to Dover by Border Force officials. Loudon said, it's just literally about giving them immediate aid. Now that is the spirit which should have been shown by all others, but they weren't. All the others neglected, and the others that were protesting against the launching of the lifeboat said, let's see what they said. Don't bring any more of those home. We are full up. That's why we stopped our donations. Now, the same piece also goes on to say that when Nigel Farage, the arch-racist, anti-migrant, nasty, made a speech denouncing the Royal National RNLI, the lifeboat, as a taxi service for illegal immigrants. Farage's condemnation of the RNLI led to donations of £200,000 in one day. So there are people, or among the ordinary people, who are still compassionate and are sensitive and are aware of the murderous role played by Nigel Nasty Farage and other racists, who include Boris Johnson, of course. And Boris Johnson's stooge, although an Asian origin person herself, the current Home Secretary, Priti Patel. Now, anyone who has been following the last 2 years, as I was saying earlier, about the channel crossing and the pronunciations by the UK Home Office, fronted by Priti Patel, and the UK quote government, fronted by Boris Johnson, would know, factually know, be aware of the following, which is that Johnson has threatened migrants with attacks by the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force. Think about that. These are people traveling in dinghies, literally dinghies. And they're being threatened by a state like the UK that they would be shot and bombed and massacred by the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy, as well as being rebuffed and obstructed and denied access by local racists on the ground. So if you want to check why we are calling this massacre, you don't have to take our literal word for it. You can look at the still accessible news archives and you can see that dozens of threats were made by Boris Johnson against these migrants, literally. Deadly threats. They were threatened with death and murder, massacre. And Priti Patel. Not only that, the local councils, the two councils that are county councils, as we have been saying, Surrey County Council and Kent County Council. These are Tory controlled councils. That is, they treat Boris Johnson as their quote leader. And they hail Boris Johnson like Hitler's disciples hailed him. So Johnson has been busy during the last 2 years issuing serial incitements of hatred, hostility, and violence against the migrants, against the refugees. Now remember what I said about the Refugee Convention and the various statutes that the UK remains signed up to. Even if there didn't exist a refugee convention, even if there was no treaty safeguarding the refugees and asylum seekers, by ordinary definition of crime, murder, deaths, and massacre, what Boris Johnson was doing, what Priti Patel was doing, what the Home Office was doing, and what these two councils, county councils, were doing, amounted to an orchestrated, organized campaign of violence intending to mass murder these people. So that's the evidence. So in December, exactly 2 years ago, Johnson says migrants should not treat UK as their own. So he was inciting murder and massacre against the migrants 2 years ago. And this is the piece by this woman, Mary Bullman, on the Independent Online, dated 15:31 hours on Monday, the 9th of December, 2019. So it's not like I'm imagining things. This is the statement that Johnson made to Sophie Ridge on Sky News in December 2019. That was literally a day or 2 days before the election of 2019, December 2019. So Johnson, when he say he's a congenital liar, we don't make up anything, and we don't even kind of rely on Sylvie Bermann, the woman who was the French ambassador until 2017 to the UK. In her memoir, she called Boris Johnson a congenital liar, and she reiterated that statement, classification, that designation, that description, when she spoke to various parts of the Fleet Street media following the publication of her book. So what we are saying is that 2 years ago, Boris Johnson incited deadly hatred against migrants. And he did that on the Sky News, Sophie Ridge. And Sophie Ridge didn't challenge him. Sophie Ridge didn't challenge him on the aspect of his illegality and criminality that mattered. She didn't say, what about the Refugee Convention? She didn't say, what about the treaties that the UK is signed up to? Nor has anyone, including Corbyn, who was still, quote, in post as the leader of the so-called Labour Party. And Corbyn was the one who was denounced and mocked by David Cameron when Corbyn paid a visit to Calais. And in the Prime Minister's questions following that short trip by Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn was condemned and mocked and ridiculed by David Cameron. So Cameron was not in post in December 2019 when Boris Johnson incited hatred against the migrants on Sky News. And Corbyn didn't condemn Johnson extensively in the way that legally and ethically and morally Johnson should have been condemned. Other people did condemn Johnson, but not Corbyn, not in the way that Corbyn should have done as the still incumbent leader of the UK Labour Party. Is it possible to suppose that the reason why, or one of the reasons why, Corbyn stayed silent or effectively maintained silence after Johnson's incitement, murderous incitement of hatred against the migrants and refugees and asylum seekers, was linked to an awareness that David Cameron had condemned him. Corbyn, that is. And here is this piece about William. He is targeting a sample of Afghans who have been allowed into Leeds. And he said to them, according to this pin by Home Affairs editor Matt Dayton on the Guardian, on the Times, the most important thing is that you are safe now. You have a bright future. You couldn't be more welcome. Thank you for all you have done for us. What on earth does he mean by for us? The Afghans did not want the British to be there occupying their country, nor did they want the Russians to be there occupying their country. And no human being, whether Afghan or Kurdish or Turkish or Iraqi or Syrian, no human being should be treated as fodder to serve another country or another nation. And this two-page spread in the Times is the kind of length and detail that are needed to find out how the refugees are created, how human beings are forced to become refugees, and how they're being massacred and murdered and used as fodder, as the other piece about Williams welcoming the people said. Which ones of your relations or friends or acquaintances? Anyone who is aware of these massacres taking place? This is the people saying, the water is coming in so fast. It's not like they sank or they drowned thousands of miles away from London. They were left, they were ignored to sink and to drown. They were left to drown, they were left to sink under the command of Boris Johnson, who had been campaigning to get votes by inciting hatred against migrants. And he has not regretted doing that because he is in post at number 10 Downing Street as the incumbent in the post of quote Prime Minister. He would not get there without inciting hatred against migrants, inciting hatred against the Turks, inciting hatred against the Muslims. Because remember, at this time that we are talking about, there are 90,000 Hong Kong people on their way to Britain. Lawful routes, none of them risking drowning or sinking. 90,000 Hong Kong people. So it's not like too many people, as the racists in the report in the Times said in Hastings. Don't bring any more of those home. We are full up. That's why we stopped our donations. Now, 90,000 people. This is not 90,000 people. These are 30 people or 40 people or whatever. The 90,000 people are being allowed as part of 3 million people that Johnson has said would be allowed to come safely into Britain from Hong Kong alone. Think about that. So it's racist on one level and it's anti-Muslim on another. And whatever level and whatever the actual description, it is all illegal. And it is all discrimination against the refugees, against the most vulnerable and the most entitled for protection and safety and welcome, that are being condemned to die and to sink and to drown. Anyone aware of the international legal framework should have been demanding that Boris Johnson be tried for crimes against humanity, amongst other things. And the fact that K Starmer hasn't made that call, hasn't made the demand, makes Starmer a colluder in the crimes against humanity that Boris Johnson has been engaged in, inciting, committing, encouraging. Now, here is a piece by Daniel Finkelstein on page 31 of the Times under comment. The Daniel Finkelstein is a conservative member of the House of Peers. Which moron? We'll come to the comment pieces in detail shortly. We shall talk about this piece by Daniel Finkelstein, who is a member of the House of Peers. I cannot check this minute who made him the member of the House of Peers, but whoever made him the House of Peers did that for a purpose, and the purpose is being served by Finkelstein's platform in the Times, apart from many other platforms that he has been given. And he's saying that the reason why Ed Miliband lost to the Conservatives in 2015 is, according to him, Miliband jumping from issue to issue. And his main conclusion in the last paragraph is that Starmer has to show a political deftness that it isn't clear he possesses. And the party has to show a will to win. And it is not yet clear it has that will. At least, however, it now has a direction. Now, Starmer, of course, is somebody that someone like Daniel Finkelstein would support, no matter how kind of hesitant his support is. And this is the latest one Finkelstein has written about Starmer in the same vein. But the claim that the Labour Party, so-called, I mean, this is within quotation marks. Remember, according to our findings, Starmer is the political murderer of the Labour Party, which doesn't exist. And the Labour Party doesn't exist politically because there is no politics by the Labour Party. And the fact that it is Starmer who is supposed to be the leader of the Labour Party completes the evidence that there is no Labour Party. He has murdered the Labour Party. So, what is the mixture of things that Finkelstein is saying? Finkelstein is saying that Angela Rayner is not a good person for the Labour Party of the country. Now, in this piece, there is no mention of the massacre of the refugees. And what I am saying is that not only has Starmer murdered the Labour Party politically, but the likes of Daniel Finkelstein, who think that Starmer is better than Corbyn, want the Labour Party to be politically murdered and dead and massacred. There is a letter from a man who is styled here as Green of Deddington, who is described as President Migration Watch UK. Now, this is the racist man who has been campaigning for the UK to break international law and UK's obligations. And his racist criminality is going to be obvious when I read the so-called letter. So we shall be continuing in the next parts and editions. This is coming to 10 minutes to 11. We shall call this one